I didn't hear the first bang. I felt it, a dull thud that traveled up the oak bench, through my spine and into a place inside me that hadn't trembled since the day my husband died. "Order!" the mayor barked. Bang, bang. That little discount gavel of his kept bouncing off wood like a toy. People laughed the kind of laugh that means they're watching something mean and pretending it's entertainment. I stood there anyway, front of the town hall under the seal of a place I helped build when most of these children were learning to tie their shoes. "My name," I said, "is Margaret." "Sit down, Mrs. Cole," the mayor smirked. "We've heard enough." The microphone screeched. Heads turned, phones rose. The room smelled like cheap coffee and wet coats. It was raining outside, the thin kind that makes old knees ache. Mine ached. So what? Beside the dais, my grandson, Tyler, leaned against a pillar like a bored actor waiting for his cue. 28, perfect haircut, expensive sneakers, eyes that used to look for my hand across the street and now slid right past me like I was a street lamp. He raised his voice just enough to cut. "Grandma, don't embarrass yourself. Please." Embarrass. The word hit me harder than the gavel. A young reporter in red lipstick mouthed to her cameraman, "Get this." Her lens found my face, then the mayor's smirk, then the easel with the glossy renderings, glass storefronts, a fake lawn greener than God, smiling families carrying shopping bags, the proposed Harbor Commons Mall, right where my cottage and garden had sat for 47 years, right where my husband and I planted blackberries and our names into the soil. The mayor tapped his mic. "For the record, Mrs. Cole has been confused about the ownership of Parcel 12B. Hands went over mouths to hide grins. I heard a cough that was really a laugh. In the third row, Tyler's friend, now a junior city planner, whispered something and flashed a thumbs up at him. Parcel 12B. My land, my porch swing, my maple that turned so red in October it could stop traffic. I set both palms on the lectern. The wood was sticky from spilled soda. My voice came out steady anyway. "Confusion," I said, "is when a man with a borrowed gavel calls theft development." A few people actually clapped. Old church ladies, a fisherman still wearing his boots, a teenager with a skateboard tucked under his arm. The mayor's jaw twitched. "Mrs. Cole," he said, voice dipped in honey, "no one is stealing anything. The town will compensate you fairly. Eminent domain requires necessity," I said. "Schools, roads, hospitals, not boutiques that sell scented candles for $29. A ripple, a huff. Someone muttered, "She came prepared." I always come prepared. 28 years a school principal will do that to a woman. I'd stood in front of rooms more unruly than this, with more dangerous children than a few men in suits. Tyler stepped forward, hands out, palms up. He used that voice the mayor had taught him in the internship, the coaxing, condescending syrup. "Grandma, the offer is generous. You can move to the senior apartments by the marina. Elevator, game nights, you'll love it." I looked at my grandson like I was seeing him for the first time. The jawline he got from his father, the eyes he got from me, now skating past mine, the fingers that used to smear peanut butter on my kitchen table now wrapped around a phone case that cost more than a week's groceries. "Tyler," I said, "when you were 5, you hid under my porch and cried because you'd squashed a ladybug. You made me bury it under the maple. Do you remember?" He flinched. The room shifted. He shook his head like a dog shaking off rain. "That was a long time ago," he said. No, I thought. It was last Tuesday. It was 1 minute ago. Time folds when truth is on the table. The mayor banged again. "We're done here. The vote is scheduled. The council has reviewed—" "Council?" I said. "You mean the 3 men whose campaigns the developer funded? The ones who suddenly started eating steaks they didn't pay for?" The reporter's head snapped. The room made that collective ooh sound of a bonfire catching. The mayor's smile dropped its mask. "Security. I'll sit," I said, before any man in a navy polo could touch me. "But I will speak." And then I did. Not with words. With a sound I hadn't made in years. I picked up my cane. Yes, I carry one, and yes, I can walk without it. And I brought the rubber tip down once on the linoleum. Not a bang, a thud, not loud, final, a period. The room didn't know why it went quiet. Rooms don't always know why, but they do. I turned away. I sat. I folded my hands in my lap and looked up at the seal again. Harbor of Mercy, it says, carved in a circle of rope. We lost our mercy somewhere between the bake sale and the ribbon cutting. The vote took 4 minutes, a chorus of aye that sounded like a tire-losing air. The only no came from Councilwoman Rivera, who meets my eye at the grocery and still calls me Miss Cole, like she's 14 and late for algebra. She looked at me now with a kind of apology that wanted to be a promise. Motion passed. Applause from people who clap at anything. The mayor shook hands like a man at a funeral, happy it isn't his. They tried to usher us out into the rain, the whole town washing onto the steps in a stream of umbrellas. The developer's SUV idled at the curb, black paint catching the street lamp. Tyler hovered near the top stair, eyes darting, the way deer do right before they bolt. He touched my elbow. "Please don't make this ugly." I looked at his hand. Young, capable, a stranger's. "You already did," I said. He took a breath. "Grandma, look, the compensation is the price of a porch swing," I said, "not the cost of the summers it held." He frowned like the sentence was a riddle. Maybe it is. Maybe all the important sentences are riddles until a person grows old enough to hear them. A camera light hit my face. The woman in red lipstick leaned in. "Mrs. Cole, do you plan to sue?" I tightened my coat. The rain smelled like pennies. My bones were singing the old weather song. Somewhere down on the docks, a halyard knocked a mast with a ticking that could drive a woman mad if she let it. "Plan?" I said. "Mercy is a plan. So is patience. So is teaching boys to be men." "Is that a yes?" she pressed, bright and eager. Someone behind her slipped and swore. Cars hissed by. I didn't answer her. I answered someone else, someone who wasn't there. A man with blue ink on his fingers and a laugh that started in his belly. He used to say, "If they ever come for our little piece, Maggie, you take out the folder." The folder, the one I hadn't touched since the funeral. I turned and started down the steps. One knee, then the other, the old rhythm, the stubborn beat. The crowd parted because even cruel crowds know how to part for an old woman in a storm. Tyler called my name once, then let it drop off the edge of his tongue like it weighed too much. At the curb, my neighbor Nina had her hatchback idling, wipers going, a travel mug steaming in the holder. "Get in," she said. "You look like a lighthouse." "A what?" "Tall, lit, dangerous to ignore." I laughed despite the lump in my throat. "You need a new thesaurus." She drove with both hands on the wheel and her jaw set. Nina does taxes for half the town and knows where the bodies are buried, financially speaking. "You know you can fight," she said, eyes forward. "There are ways. I've seen worse undone." "Worse than taking a widow's garden to build a store that sells fake ship wheels?" I said. "Worse," she said, and her mouth made a hard line that made me believe her. At home, I hung my wet coat where his used to hang and listened to the old house settle around me like an animal sighing. The maple moaned, the porch creaked. The clock in the hallway, a wedding gift shaped like a ship's wheel that is real, ticked 5 minutes fast like it has for 47 years. I've never corrected it. Some things you leave honest. The cane went by the door. The shoes went on the rubber mat. My hand went to the place under the stairs where the wood has a different tone if you tap it. He taught me that tone, taught me how to listen to wood, how to listen to men, how to listen to myself. The panel lifted like it had been waiting. My fingers found the twine. The knot came loose like muscle memory. The cardboard was the same brown as every attic in America. The tab had my name in his hand. M. Cole, Papers. He'd written it on a night in 1976 when a storm took half our shingles and he said, "If the roof goes, we save this first. Not photos, not jewelry, this." I carried the box to the kitchen table and didn't sit. I stood like a soldier at attention and opened the past. Deeds, maps inked in blue that had gone a little green with time. Letters on onion paper translucent as snow. Receipts from a hardware store that used to sell nails by the pound, scooped with a tin cup. A photograph of me in a blue dress holding a shovel while my husband grinned with his whole face, and the mayor's father, yes, that mayor's father, signed the back of a document that said something no one in that hall would ever think to ask about: Reversionary Clause. The word purred in my chest like a cat finding the warm spot on the couch. Reversionary, a promise that if the land ceased to be used for the purpose stated, it would revert to the owner or her assigns. The purpose, stated in neat type by a man who loved neat type, was public green and community garden. They could build a boutique. They could sell saltwater taffy and pre-distressed boat shoes. They could not, by law, pave a public green and call it Commons with an S, and hope no one noticed that quiet reversionary curled there like a sleeping snake. I pulled out the next stack, found the charter, found the founding donors, found my name twice, once as Margaret Cole, once as Margaret Avery, because I hadn't changed it yet on paper when we wrote the check that kept the town from selling the waterfront to a condo developer in 1981. Found the writer he'd insisted on, the one everyone forgot about because we lived modestly and didn't put our names on plaques. People forget women who don't put their names on plaques. The phone buzzed. Nina again. "You find it?" she asked without hello. "I did," I said. She breathed out, long. "Then we make calls. Not to the mayor, to state, to the paper, to a lawyer who likes old words as much as you like old wood." "Nina," I said, "call Jacob." "Jacob who?" "Jacob Reed," I said, and my voice surprised me. It had the sound my students used to hear right before a pop quiz. The boy who drew ladders in the margins and told me he wanted to grow up to climb them. He's a lawyer now, a good one, and he still writes thank you notes at Christmas. "On it," she said. I put the phone down and let the kitchen go quiet. Rain pinged the maple leaves. The clock ticked its honest lie. My husband's boot scuff is still on the back step, shaped like a crescent moon. You can lose a town by inches. You can win it back by documents. A car idled outside, then moved on. Somewhere far off, a foghorn complained. I put my hand flat on the deed and felt the paper cool and smooth and stronger than it looked. Tomorrow they would say I was confused. Tomorrow they would say I was sentimental. Tomorrow they would mispronounce reversionary and look at the camera like it was their friend. Tonight I remembered the sound of a cheap gavel and found the weight of an old one. Not oak, not rubber, older than wood, older than law, truth. I closed the box and tied it with the twine again because a good ritual deserves respect. I set the kettle on, because even warriors drink tea. I wrote Jacob's name on a notepad in letters big enough for a camera to read, in case the lady with red lipstick came knocking in the morning. Then I did something no one in that hall would understand. I walked to the living room, turned off the lamps, and sat in the dark with the map of the town in my lap. My finger traced the shoreline, the breakwater, the gentle curve of Harbor Street where children ride bikes and men who think they are kings park illegally. I put my finger on parcel 12B. "Mine," I said softly. Not greedy, not stubborn, sacred. The rain lightened. The kettle clicked. The house, my house, made the small, satisfied sound houses make when their people remember what they stand for. Tomorrow the town would hear my voice. And when the mayor banged his toy again, the whole room would finally hear the other sound, the one that silences men who mistake age for weakness. Not a bang, not a thud, a clause, a door, a gavel older than his. Morning came like a verdict, gray sky, low tide, gulls complaining the way lawyers do when they know they've lost but haven't admitted it yet. I made tea strong enough to wake a corpse, put on my old yellow raincoat, and sat at the table where the box waited. The papers looked harmless now. Quiet, thin, the way snakes look before they move. The phone rang exactly at 8:03. "Mrs. Cole?" "Jacob?" "Yes, ma'am. I never thought I'd get a call from my 8th grade principal again, especially not about real estate law." His voice still had that quick curiosity I remembered, the one that used to get him into trouble and then out again because teachers liked it. "I still have your essay," I said. He laughed, surprised. "The one about justice being like gravity?" "The same. You got a B because it was too dramatic. Turns out you were right." He went quiet for a second. "Nina filled me in. You have the original deed?" and the charter and the reversionary clause, typed, signed, sealed, and witnessed by 2 men who are now dead but honest. Good, that's gold. I don't want gold, Jacob. I want my garden. You might get both. He promised to drive down from Portland that afternoon. Keep everything sealed and dry, he said. And whatever you do, don't sign anything the town sends. I almost smiled. They already sent flowers. What? From the developer, orchids, cheap apology for theft. Don't water them, he said. Let them die slow. By noon, word had spread that I was considering litigation. The grocery clerk looked at me differently, half pity, half awe. The local radio mentioned a beloved community member raising questions about the Harbor Commons project. And the mayor's assistant left a voicemail with the syrupy tone people use before a storm. Mrs. Cole, we'd love to clarify any misunderstandings before things become complicated. Too late, sweetheart, I thought. They were already complicated. Truth always is. At 2 o'clock, Jacob arrived. Same dark curls, now with silver at the edges. Same eyes, sharper. He carried a leather briefcase that looked older than my grandson's conscience. Principal Cole, he said with that half grin that made juries trust him. Margaret, I corrected. Principal Cole retired when good manners did. He sat, opened the box, and let out a low whistle. You weren't kidding. This isn't just old paperwork. This is dynamite. Read the clause, I said. He did. Slowly, twice. Then he leaned back. They can't build a mall. The land was deeded for public green use. If they violate that purpose, ownership reverts to you automatically. They'd have to go through state court to challenge it, and they'd lose. I poured him tea. Tell that to a mayor who thinks law is something that happens to other people. Oh, we will, he said. But first we build the wall. The wall? The wall of facts. We'll file the reversion notice, alert the state land registry, freeze any development permits, and... The phone rang again. I didn't move. He smiled. Go ahead, let me hear him squirm. I picked it up. The mayor's voice filled the kitchen like a bad song. Margaret, let's be reasonable. We both know this land will serve the community better as a commercial space. You mean it'll serve you better, I said. He chuckled. You're upset, I understand, but these clauses, if they even exist, are outdated. They have no standing in modern zoning law. Jacob mouthed silently. Wrong. I smiled. Then you won't mind when the state court tells you that. The line went quiet long enough for me to hear his breath hitch. You're making a mistake, he said finally. No, I replied. I made one 30 years ago when I trusted men who smile too much. Click. Jacob set his cup down. He'll call his lawyers before the tea cools. Good, I said. Let them boil. By sunset, half the town knew I wasn't moving. Nina said the social media crowd had given me a nickname, the Harbor Witch. I told her I'd heard worse from 7th graders. That night, while Jacob drafted the injunction on my dining table, I walked out to the porch. The maple was wet, its branches heavy with the day's rain. Somewhere in the leaves, a mockingbird rehearsed someone else's tune. The streetlight caught the edge of the mailbox, empty except for a yellow envelope sticking out like a tongue. It was from Tyler. The handwriting tried to look casual, but the slant betrayed him. I opened it under the porch light. Grandma, please stop this. You don't know what you're doing. You're letting people use you for their own agenda. The mayor says the paperwork you have isn't valid. They'll make you look crazy. We can still fix this quietly if you sign the sale agreement by Friday. Love, Tyler. I read it twice. The word love looked borrowed, like a word he'd learned from someone else's story. I went back inside and handed it to Jacob. He read, sighed, and slid it into the folder. Keep it. Proof of pressure. Pressure, I repeated, feels more like betrayal. He didn't argue. Good lawyers know when silence is the only fair response. At dawn, the news van parked outside. I was in my garden, cutting basil, when the young reporter with the red lipstick appeared again. She waved like we were old friends. Mrs. Cole, can we have a few words? The public's fascinated by your story. My story, I said, sniffing the basil. Funny how it became news only when someone tried to steal it. She adjusted her mic. Is it true you're suing the mayor? I'm not suing anyone, I said. I'm reminding them of something they forgot. Which is, That paper remembers longer than people do. That night, the interview aired. They played the clip of me holding the deed, my thumb over the line with my husband's signature. The camera caught my eyes for 3 seconds, too steady for a woman they called confused. The next morning, half the town sent me flowers. The other half sent threats. The mayor called an emergency press conference, declaring the documents unverified relics, and my actions emotionally driven. I watched on TV while Jacob ate toast beside me. He grinned. They're panicking. I sipped tea. They should. Then the phone rang again, but this time it wasn't the mayor. It was Tyler. His voice was smaller, softer, like he was 5 again and had broken something. No? Grandma, why are you doing this? People are talking. My job. Jobs come and go, I said. So does decency if you don't guard it. They said you could go to jail for falsifying documents. Then I'll take the same cell they built this town on. Please, he whispered. Don't ruin everything. Tyler, I said quietly, you already did. He hung up before I could tell him I loved him anyway. 3 days later, Jacob filed the injunction. It hit the mayor's office like thunder. Construction halted. The developers' trucks turned around, and the newspaper headline the next morning read, Grandma's Gavel, retired principal halts multi-million project with 40-year-old clause. They used the picture of me on the porch with my cane, the same cane that made the sound that stopped a room. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt the quiet ache of victory earned too late to share with the man who taught me how to win it. That night, I opened a letter I hadn't touched since the funeral. My husband's handwriting, neat as always. If they forget what we built, remind them gently at first. Then, if they still don't listen, remind them louder. Love. R. I folded the letter back into the envelope and whispered, Loud enough, love? The maple rustled like applause. 2 weeks passed. The mayor's lawyer, slick, thin, probably allergic to humility, requested a settlement meeting. Jacob insisted we go. It's good strategy, he said. Let them underestimate you in person. The meeting was in the same hall where the Gavel had first humiliated me. They hadn't even changed the flowers. Same wilted carnations, same coffee stains, same arrogance. The mayor smiled like a man rehearsing charm. Mrs. Cole, Mr. Reed, let's be adults. I've been one since 1973, I said. You're still working on it. He ignored that. We're prepared to offer a substantial sum in exchange for a quiet resolution. No press, no court. How substantial? Jacob asked. 500,000. I almost laughed. That's the price of your conscience, not my land. The lawyer leaned in. Ma'am, if this goes to court, it will take years. He caught himself before saying old. You may not wish to spend your remaining time on litigation. I looked him straight in the eye. Son, I've been spending my remaining time since the day I was born. The question is how. He blinked. The mayor's smile cracked. Jacob folded his hands and said evenly, We'll see you in state court. As we stood to leave, I noticed Tyler at the back of the room. Pale, nervous, trying not to meet my eyes. When he finally did, he mouthed one word, sorry. For a second, I almost believed him. Then I saw him pocket an envelope the mayor slipped him and walk out the side door. My heart didn't break this time. It just closed, like a door that's learned how. That night, I went to the attic. The box was still open from Jacob's last visit, but something else caught my eye. A smaller envelope marked to be used only when the town forgets itself. Inside was a photograph of the first council standing in front of a sign, Harbor Commons, Public Green, 1981, and behind them, a young man holding a shovel. My husband, next to him, an old blacksmith named Tom Avery who'd kept a carbon copy of every contract he'd ever signed. He died 20 years ago, but his shop had passed to his son, now an old man himself. I smiled. Tomorrow I'd pay him a visit. Some documents age, others mature. Outside, rain began again, tapping the roof like an impatient drum. The town thought they'd heard my gavel once. They were about to hear it again. The next morning smelled like rust and salt. The kind of morning that reminds you this town was built by hands, not signatures. I wrapped my scarf tight and walked the 7 blocks to Avery's Forge, a place older than most marriages here. The sign still read T. Avery and Son, blacksmithing and repairs, though the son was now older than the tools. The bell above the door gave a tired ring when I pushed it open. Inside, the air was warm with the ghosts of 1,000 hammer strikes. Sparks flew somewhere in the back, rhythmic and patient, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. "Tom Avery, Jr.?" I called. A man emerged from the shadows, tall, shoulders bowed from years of bending metal. His hands looked like tools themselves, scarred, steady, honest. "Well, I'll be," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Margaret Cole, right? Haven't seen you since the bicentennial parade. Still fighting for this town?" "Still trying to remind it who built it," I said. He grinned. "Then you came for the ledger." I blinked. "You know? Word travels faster than fire in a forge, ma'am. You rattled the mayor's cage good. My dad kept records on every job he did for the city, even the fence posts around your parcel. He never trusted the council to keep honest copies." He walked to a steel cabinet, unlocked it with a key hanging from his neck, and pulled out a black book bound with wire. The edges were charred on one side, probably from a long-ago fire. He opened to a page dated 1981. There it was. Harbor Commons, Public Green, signatures, measurements, the mayor's father's initials, and at the bottom a line that made my breath catch. "Materials provided under condition of community use. Any change of purpose reverts to donor's heirs." He looked up at me. "Guess that's you." I smiled slowly. "Guess it is." He tore the page carefully from the binding, slid it into a clear sleeve, and handed it to me. "Don't thank me," he said. "Just win." I left the forge with the page tucked under my coat like contraband. Outside, the air had that stillness before a storm. Every town has a moment like that, when silence tilts and you know thunder's coming. Jacob arrived that afternoon with coffee and a look that said good news, bad news, same time. "State court accepted our filing," he said, handing me a folder. "The injunction stands. Construction stays frozen until the hearing. And the bad news?" He sighed. "The mayor filed a counterclaim. Says you fabricated the reversion clause and coerced an elderly witness years ago." I nearly laughed. Elderly witness? My husband was 45 and in better shape than their whole council combined. "He's pushing for a competency evaluation," Jacob continued quietly. I stared. "He's calling me senile." Jacob nodded. "It's their only angle left. Paint you as confused, unstable, emotional. They'll try to use your age as a weapon." "Let them," I said. "Age built this town. Age can tear it down too." He smiled. "Then you'll need more proof than just paper. We'll call witnesses. Nina, Tom Avery, maybe even old Councilwoman Rivera. Bring them all," I said, "and make sure the judge knows my handwriting's neater than the mayor's lies." That night, the power went out. A storm had rolled in from the Atlantic, angry and full of salt. Lightning flickered through the windows like flashbulbs. I lit candles and sat with my papers spread out. The deed, the ledger, the letter from my husband. For a moment, I let the quiet hum of rain fill the house. It reminded me of the nights we used to count thunder like seconds between heartbeats. Then came the knock, 3 sharp raps, quick and unfriendly. When I opened the door, Tyler stood there, drenched, desperate, and not alone. Behind him, 2 men in dark coats lingered near the streetlight, faces hidden under hats. "Grandma, we need to talk," he said. "You brought friends for that?" "They're just here to make sure you're safe." "Safe from what?" I asked. "Paper cuts?" He winced. "Please, the mayor says this is going to ruin us all. You, me, everyone. Just sign the agreement and they'll make this go away. You can even keep some of the money." "Some?" I repeated. "How generous of them to let me keep what's already mine." He stepped forward. "You don't understand. I could lose my job. Juliet's pregnant." The words hit me like a cold wind. "Pregnant." He nodded, eyes wet. "I'm going to be a dad. Please don't do this to us." I looked at his face, searching for the boy who used to help me in the garden, but all I saw was a man carrying other people's greed like an inheritance. Tyler, I said softly, if you think selling your grandmother's dignity is how you start a family, you're already lost. He clenched his jaw. You'll regret this. No, I said, closing the door. You will. The sound of his car splashing away through puddles was the loneliest sound I'd ever heard. 2 days later, the mayor held a televised rally at the Civic Center. Giant banners read Harbor Commons, Progress for All. They called me a stubborn old woman blocking the town's future. I watched from my couch, tea in hand, and almost admired their confidence. The reporter with the red lipstick turned her mic toward the mayor. What do you say to allegations that Mrs. Cole possesses documents proving her legal ownership? He smiled like oil. If she does, we'll be happy to review them, once her attorney stops hiding behind technicalities. Jacob muted the TV. He's bluffing. They're terrified. Good, I said. Terrified people make mistakes. He nodded. Speaking of which, we found one. The developer's permit request lists the wrong lot number. They filed for 12A, not 12B. I blinked. They misfiled the parcel? He grinned. Yep, bureaucratic sloppiness. Which means legally they have no claim at all. But if we expose that now, they'll fix it before trial. We save it for the courtroom. The knockout. I smiled slowly. You really did learn something in my class. The hearing came fast. The courthouse smelled of polish and old air. Reporters crowded the steps. Inside, the room buzzed like a beehive of whispers. The mayor sat at one table with his lawyer, a sleek man with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I sat at the other, Jacob beside me, calm as a tide. When the judge entered, everyone rose. He was an old man with silver hair and a look that said he'd seen too many liars for one lifetime. Case of Cole versus City of Harbor Point, the clerk announced. The mayor's lawyer stood first. Your Honor, this is a tragic misunderstanding fueled by outdated paperwork and emotional manipulation. Mrs. Cole's claims have no standing under current zoning statutes. Jacob rose before the man could finish. Your Honor, may I? The judge nodded. My client is not confused. She's not emotional. She's the co-author of the very charter this city stands on. He placed the original deed on the desk, then the ledger from Avery's Forge, then the letter from the mayor's father. The city accepted land under a reversionary clause. Clause 9C of the 1981 Harbor Commons Charter states that any non-public use shall revert ownership to the donor or heirs. That's the law they swore to uphold. The judge lifted his glasses. You have the original signatures? Yes, sir. He examined the page, frowning in concentration. This signature, he pointed to one name, belongs to my predecessor. He looked up, eyes narrowing at the mayor. My father's friend. The mayor shifted in his seat. Your Honor, surely you can't. Sit down, the judge said, voice like iron. For the first time, I saw him sweat. Jacob continued. Furthermore, the developer's application mistakenly lists parcel 12A, not 12B. The project has no legal claim to Mrs. Cole's property. They were trying to pave the wrong lot. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. The mayor's lawyer turned pale. The judge leaned back, hands steepled. Do you have anything to say, Mr. Mayor? The man's mouth opened, but nothing came out. I stood. If I may, Your Honor. He nodded. I walked to the front, cane tapping the tile once, twice, steady as a metronome. I taught half this town to read, I said, but somehow its leaders forgot how. They forgot how to read words like trust, community, and honor. So I brought them here today to learn again. Silence fell. Even the reporters stopped writing. This land was given for the people, for the children who still run barefoot through my garden fence, for the fishermen who sit under the maple when their knees ache. You can't buy that with a mall. You can't sell it with a signature. The judge looked at me for a long moment, then at the mayor. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Mrs. Margaret Cole. The city is ordered to cease all development activities on parcel 12B and restore its status as public green. Furthermore, the court recommends an ethics investigation into the actions of the current mayor's office. The gavel came down once. Not cheap wood this time, but real oak. The sound filled the room like thunder finally remembering where to fall. Outside, cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, but I didn't stop. I kept walking until the courthouse steps leveled into the street. Nina and Jacob caught up to me. "You did it," she cried. "You won." I shook my head gently. "No, the town won. I just reminded it how." Across the street, Tyler stood alone by the fountain, hands in his pockets, face pale. For a second, our eyes met. He didn't smile, didn't wave, but he nodded. Small, broken, maybe beginning. I nodded back. The sky cracked open, not with rain, but sunlight. Sharp, sudden, pure. The maple leaves outside my house would shine like coins tonight. I thought of my husband's words. If they forget, remind them gently. Then louder. This was the loud part. But there was one act left. The part where you teach what the gavel means. Because justice, once found, has to echo. The morning after the verdict, Harbor Point woke up different. The sea was calm, but the town wasn't. Half the shops had my picture taped to their windows. The one from the paper, me standing on the courthouse steps, wind in my hair, cane in hand. The headline read, "The woman who stopped 'em all." I didn't ask for fame. Fame is just gossip with better lighting. What I wanted was silence. The kind that follows peace. But peace doesn't come quietly. It comes with reporters, phone calls, and people who suddenly remember your birthday. The first knock came before breakfast. A college student, journalism major, glasses fogged from the morning chill. "Mrs. Cole, I'm writing my thesis on civic ethics. Can I quote you?" I poured him coffee and said, "Quote the land, it remembers better." The second knock was a delivery, not flowers this time, a thick envelope from the mayor's office. Inside was a single line typed in cold black ink. "You made your point. Don't make us dig deeper," I smiled. "Us? There's always an us behind a coward's threat." Jacob said to ignore it. Nina said to frame it. I compromised, pinned it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a gavel. By noon, the mayor resigned, for health reasons. The news called it graceful. I called it convenient. His lawyer disappeared faster than a guilty conscience. But the developer didn't quit. Men like that don't stop just because they're told no. They stop when they run out of places to hide. Jacob showed up that evening, laptop glowing, eyes bright. "We've got something," he said. The developer filed a series of donations. Unregistered, shell companies linked to the mayor's nephew. "Bribes," I said. "Exactly. We can take it federal." I looked at the screen. Numbers, dates, fake charities named after seabirds. Crooked things always borrow nature's beauty. "You think they'll listen to an old woman again?" I asked. "They won't have a choice," he said. That night, I walked to the garden. The grass was wet with dew, the air soft with early summer. The maple towered above me, its branches heavy and kind. I whispered, "We did it." The wind answered like laughter. Then I saw headlights. A car slowed near the curb. Black tinted windows, engine humming too long. I stood still, hand tight on my cane. After a moment, it rolled away. No plates, no sound but the sea. When I went inside, I locked the door for the first time in years. Justice has a price. It always has. 2 days later, I got a call from a man who introduced himself as Agent Sullivan, Department of State Integrity Division. "Mrs. Cole, we received your attorney's documents. We'd like to meet." "When?" I asked. "Tonight, quietly." I told him the coffee pot would be on by 7. He arrived on time. Gray suit, clipped vowels, polite shoes. He examined the ledger, the receipts, the donation trail Jacob uncovered. "This is impressive work," he said. "You understand, if this checks out, several officials could face prison time." "I'm not after prison," I said. "I'm after decency." He nodded slowly. Decency and prison often share a fence. When he left, I noticed something. A small pin on his lapel. Integrity Division, yes, but the emblem had been polished too clean, like it hadn't seen real dirt. After he drove off, I called Jacob. "Find out if Agent Sullivan exists," I said. He did, but the real one was stationed 3 states away. The man in my kitchen was a fraud. The next night, someone broke my window. Nothing stolen, just glass everywhere, rain in my kitchen, a single note left on the table. "Stay retired, Mrs. Cole." I swept the glass at dawn, humming hymns so my hands wouldn't shake. Nina arrived before I'd finished. "Do we call the police?" she asked. "They already know," I said. "Maybe they sent the note." She frowned. "You're scaring me." "I'm already scared," I said. "I'm just older, so it doesn't show." That afternoon, Jacob came with 2 state officers, real ones this time. They installed motion lights, cameras, locks. I let them fuss while I baked a pie. Old habits. "You're remarkably calm," one said. "Calm is cheaper than fear," I replied. By the end of the week, the investigation spread. The local paper ran front-page stories. Mayor under federal scrutiny, developer tied to offshore accounts. Tyler called again. His voice cracked like wet wood. "Grandma, they fired me." "I know." "You knew?" "I warned you." He started to cry. Not loud, just that quiet kind men never let out until the world stops watching. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't know what they were doing. They promised." "Everyone promises," I said gently. "Now you get to start telling the truth." He sniffed. "How?" "Come to court. Tell them what you saw." There was a pause. "They'll destroy me." "No, Tyler, lying did that already. This is how you rebuild." He didn't answer. But the next morning, he did something I hadn't expected. He walked into the state courthouse and told everything. Every email, every meeting, every bribe. The cameras caught him in a gray suit that didn't quite fit, hands trembling, voice steady. The town gasped again, and this time, they didn't look at me. They looked at themselves. The scandal broke wide open. 2 councilmen resigned. The developer fled overseas. The fake agent was arrested for obstruction, and the state officially restored Parcel 12B to its original designation. Harbor Point Public Green. The news ran footage of volunteers cleaning up the lot, planting flowers, repainting the old benches. Children ran through puddles where bulldozers once stood. I sat on the porch and watched from a distance. My knees ached, my tea cooled, and for the first time in months, the air didn't taste like metal. Jacob came by, papers in hand. "They're naming the garden after you," he said. "They'd better not," I said. "It belongs to everyone." He smiled. "They're calling it the Gavel Green." That made me laugh. A deep, honest laugh that startled the sparrows. The day of the dedication, the town gathered by the maple. Children carried small flags, old men wore their Sunday hats, and a brass band tuned up with more enthusiasm than skill. The mayor's replacement, Councilwoman Rivera, stood at the podium. Her voice shook at first, then grew clear. Once, this land was almost lost to greed. It was saved by courage, by history, and by one woman's refusal to forget what mattered. Applause rose, soft and proud. I didn't stand on the stage. I sat beneath the maple where my husband had planted it, where the ground still smelled like roots and rain. Rivera looked at me. "Mrs. Cole, would you do us the honor?" I nodded and walked to the new sign. The ribbon waited. Green silk, sunlight catching the edges. Jacob handed me a small wooden mallet carved from the same oak that once held a cheap gavel. "Go on," he whispered. "You earned the last word." I tapped the mallet once. The ribbon snapped clean, the crowd cheered, but I wasn't listening to them. I was listening to the sound the mallet made. That soft, final note. Not a bang, not a shout, just truth landing where it belonged. That evening, the garden emptied. The lanterns flickered. Tyler approached quietly, holding his newborn daughter in his arms. "She's 6 weeks early," he said. "Juliet wanted to name her Margaret." I looked at the baby, small, pink, wrapped in peace, and smiled. "Then teach her early that mercy isn't weakness." He nodded, tears cutting through the dust on his cheeks. "I'm sorry," he said again. I touched his hand. "Then live like it matters. That's all the apology the world ever needs." When they left, the night settled warm and still. I sat on the bench under the maple, the sign gleaming in the lamplight, the Gavel Green, established 1981, reclaimed 2025. The air smelled like basil and forgiveness. The courthouse clock rang 9 times, one for every lie exposed, I decided. Then the wind carried a sound only I could hear, the low laugh of a man with ink on his fingers. You reminded them louder, he said in memory. Yes, I whispered, but next time they'll remember sooner. The stars blinked like witnesses signing their names. Justice didn't just echo anymore. It sang. Justice may end in court, but peace begins afterward, in the quiet when everyone else goes home. For weeks after the dedication, Harbor Point buzzed like a hive that had just survived a storm. The newspapers called me the conscience of the coast. The talk shows called me the Iron Widow. Even strangers sent letters, some grateful, some angry, all proof that the town had woken up. But when the cameras left, something else crept in. Emptiness. I'd spent months fighting, every day a mission, every night a memory. Now there were no hearings to attend, no lawyers to outwit, no speeches to give. Only the hum of the refrigerator and the slow tick of the ship's wheel clock. That's when the real trial began, the one no judge can hear. One morning, I found myself standing in the garden long before sunrise. The air was silver, still between night and day. Dew clung to the grass like tears with nowhere to fall. I whispered into the quiet, "We did it, love. It's over." But the silence that answered wasn't relief. It was purpose. A whisper inside me said, "Not yet." That same afternoon, Jacob stopped by with coffee and a grin. "You're trending again," he said, holding up his phone. "I don't even know what that means." "It means people are sharing your speech from the courthouse. Some are calling it a manifesto for civic responsibility. You're a movement now, Mrs. Cole." "A movement?" I chuckled. "I just wanted my garden back." "Sometimes," he said, "gardens are revolutions that grow quietly." He wasn't wrong. Invitations started arriving. A university ethics panel, a civic leadership summit, even a national news network asking for an interview. I said yes to one. Just one. A radio program called Voices That Built America. The host, a woman with a velvet voice, asked me the simplest question. "Mrs. Cole, what do you hope people learn from your story?" I thought about it, eyes on the floor of the studio, microphone humming softly like a heartbeat. "I hope," I said slowly, "that people learn silence is not always kindness. Sometimes it's permission. And permission is how small wrongs grow into big ones." The studio went quiet. Then the host whispered, "That's going to stay with people." Good, I thought, let it. Weeks turned to months. Tyler visited often now, helping fix the fence, mowing the grass, changing light bulbs I pretended I couldn't reach. He had a look I recognized from my husband's face, the look of a man rebuilding something fragile. One evening, while we sat on the porch, he said, "I've been offered a job in civic reform, community liaison. They said my testimony impressed them." "Your truth did," I said. "Jobs come from that." He smiled shyly. "I want to make things right, Grandma. For real this time." "You already started," I said. "Now keep going before life forgets to thank you." He looked at the sign, the Gavel green, and said softly, "You ever think about leaving here? Moving somewhere quiet?" I laughed. "Son, this is quiet, the kind of quiet I fought for." But not everyone loved the new Harbor Point. One night, while the town slept, someone vandalized the garden. The benches were overturned, the sign splintered, paint splashed across the words, "Old doesn't mean right." Nina called me before sunrise, voice shaking. "You shouldn't see it," she said. "I've seen worse," I replied. "Meet me there in 20 minutes. When I arrived, the street was empty. The maple stood tall, unbothered, the leaves dripping with dawn. The rest looked wounded, soil torn up, flowers crushed. Jacob showed up soon after, camera in hand. "We'll report it." "No," I said quietly. "We'll rebuild it." I knelt, slow, careful, deliberate, and started replanting the flowers. My hands sank into the dirt, cold and forgiving. Within an hour, neighbors began arriving. An old fisherman, 2 students, a mother with a stroller, even a few kids with shovels. They didn't ask what happened. They just worked. By noon, the benches were upright again, the sign repaired, the paint scrubbed off. Someone had brought a new piece of wood and carved fresh words beneath the old ones. "Truth doesn't age." I ran my hand over the letters and smiled. Whoever had vandalized the garden had only reminded it why it existed. A few days later, the police caught the culprits. A group of young developers angry about anti-progress activism. The town wanted to press charges, but I told the judge to give them community service instead. Let them plant what they tried to destroy, I said. That'll teach them more than jail. They worked under the maple for a month. Silent, sweating, embarrassed. One of them, a girl no older than 20, finally asked, "Why didn't you hate us?" I smiled. Because hate's like concrete. Once it sets, nothing grows. Summer melted into autumn. The leaves turned the color of old gold and the air filled with that bittersweet smell of endings. Jacob came by with another folder. Thinner this time. "The federal case is closing," he said. "Convictions are in. The developer pled guilty. The mayor took a plea deal." "Good," I said. "Let them rebuild their souls now." He hesitated. "You could sue for damages. You'd win easily." I shook my head. "Money's just noise. I already got what I came for." Silence. He smiled. "You're something else, Margaret. Just old enough to remember the difference between owning and belonging," I said. One crisp October morning, a bus full of schoolchildren arrived at the Gavel Green. Their teacher waved at me from the path. "Mrs. Cole, would you mind saying a few words to the class?" I stood before the group. 20 bright faces, sneakers muddy, hands sticky from apple slices. "You see this tree?" I said, pointing to the maple. "It's older than most of your parents. It's seen people forget what it means to stand for something, but it also remembers how to forgive." A little girl raised her hand. "Did you really fight the mayor?" I smiled. "I didn't fight him, sweetheart," I reminded him. "Of what?" "That a promise doesn't expire just because the person who made it does." They clapped, though they didn't really understand. But one day, they would. When the bus left, the field went quiet again. Leaves fell like slow applause. That night, I sat on the porch, a blanket over my knees, tea steaming in my hands. Tyler's baby, my great-granddaughter, slept inside, her soft breathing the most peaceful sound in the world. Nina texted a photo of the evening sky over the harbor. The caption read, "The light looks like it's thanking you." I stared at it for a long time. The light wasn't thanking me. It was reminding me, all victories fade unless someone keeps them lit. So I took out my husband's old notebook, flipped past the deeds and letters, and began writing something new. At the top of the page, the Gavel Project, a fund for honest beginnings. It would sponsor young students in law, journalism, and public service, anyone who promised to guard truth, not just recite it. The town would manage it. The land's income would fund it. My name wouldn't be on the brochure. That was the deal. Because if justice needed a face, it shouldn't always be mine. Weeks later, on the first frost of winter, I stood by the maple again. The garden slept under white lace. I pressed my cane into the soil and whispered, "You're in good hands now." Somewhere behind me, the courthouse bell struck noon. Clean, bright, final. The cheap gavel that once humiliated me had been replaced with one carved from oak, displayed in the town hall beside a plaque that read, "In honor of those who reminded Harbor Point that mercy is not weakness, it's memory." I ran my fingers over the words and smiled. The trial after the trial was over. The jury, time itself, had delivered its verdict, and for once, it was unanimous. Winter deepened like an old photograph, quiet, sepia, and soft at the edges. The garden slept under frost, the harbor steamed in the cold, and my mornings became slower. I'd wake before dawn, make tea, watch the gulls circle the pier, and listen to the clock tick the same 5 minutes fast. For the first time in a long time, nothing was urgent. The war was over. The land was safe. The truth was awake. But peace has its own kind of work, keeping the memory alive without letting it turn bitter. One afternoon, a letter arrived. Thick paper, elegant handwriting. It was from the governor's office. "Mrs. Margaret Cole, the state of Maine hereby extends its gratitude for your outstanding civic contribution. We wish to present you with the Medal of Public Integrity at the State House on February 14th. February 14th. 47 years to the day my husband and I signed the original deed. I took it as a sign that God still likes symmetry. Nina insisted on buying me a new dress. Something proper for television, she said. I told her television had enough dresses. I'd wear my garden coat instead. She rolled her eyes. "You're impossible, no," I said, smiling. "I'm consistent." The day of the ceremony was all sunlight and glass. The marble floors of the State House echoed with shoes and applause. Jacob stood beside me, tie slightly crooked. Tyler held his daughter, now chubby and curious, clutching a toy gavel he'd carved from pine. The governor read my name with the care people reserve for things older than themselves. Mrs. Margaret Cole reminded us that progress means nothing without principle. Her courage restored not just land, but faith in the rule of law. He pinned the medal on my coat. The cameras flashed. I smiled, not for pride, but for proof that even small voices can travel far when the truth carries them. When it was over, Tyler hugged me tighter than he had since he was a boy. "Grandma," he whispered, "I want her—" He nodded at his daughter. "To grow up in your kind of town." I touched the baby's cheek. "Then teach her to speak slow and think honest. The rest will follow." Weeks passed. The medal stayed in its box. I didn't need to look at it to remember what it meant. The garden became busy again with life. Tulips in rows, children's laughter, and the faint smell of fresh paint. The sign now had an extra line beneath the Gavel green, established by Margaret and Robert Cole, 1981. Restored by Truth, 2025. Sometimes I'd sit on the bench at sunset and read it aloud like a prayer. Then, one late March evening, a young woman approached me while I was watering the herbs. She looked nervous, like someone about to confess. "Mrs. Cole?" "Yes, dear." "I'm Claire. Claire Donnelly. My dad was the developer." I paused. The watering can trembled just a little. "Go on." "He passed away last month. Heart attack." "I'm sorry." "Before he died, he made me promise to find you. He wanted to say you were right. He said he forgot why he started building in the first place." Her voice cracked. "He told me to give you this." She handed me a small envelope. Inside was a check made out to the Gavel project. Donation. I looked at her, eyes red, hands shaking. "You don't owe me anything," she shook her head. "We owe you a future. My father lost his, but he wanted someone to have one." We stood there in the fading light, 2 generations of mistakes and forgiveness, and for once, words weren't needed. That night, I wrote in my husband's old notebook again. Truth has children too. Sometimes they're born from apologies. Then I closed the book and set it beside the metal box. Spring came gentle. The town held its first Truth and Green Festival at the park. There were booths, music, speeches by young students who spoke like they'd swallowed hope. Tyler's daughter toddled across the grass, chasing petals blown from the maple. When she tripped and fell, I started to rise. But she laughed, clapped her tiny hands, and got up on her own. The crowd cheered. I felt my heart lift with her. Jacob leaned over and said, "You see that? That's your legacy." I nodded. "That's everyone's legacy." That night, I sat by the window, lamp low, tea warm. The house hummed softly, the sound of pipes, wind, memory. I took out my husband's letter one last time. If they forget, remind them gently. Then louder, I smiled. We reminded them, love, and now they remember on their own. The clock struck 10. 5 minutes fast, just like always. Outside, the harbor lights blinked like steady hearts, and somewhere in the distance, faint but clear, a hammer struck metal. Once, twice, echoing from Avery's forge, still alive, still working. It sounded almost like a gavel, only this time it wasn't judging anyone. It was blessing them. The next morning, the Gavel green filled with laughter again. Children played under the maple, couples picnicked on the grass, and somewhere a small bronze plaque caught the sun. Truth doesn't age. It only waits to be heard. I tapped my cane once on the path, not for balance, just tradition. The sound rang out across the field, clean and final. And in that moment, I knew the truth. It was never really my gavel. It was theirs. The whole town's, the echo that stayed. 3 years later, the Gavel green has grown taller than anyone imagined. The maple's branches now touch the church bells on windy days, and its roots stretch beneath the benches where generations now sit. The town has changed. New faces, new laughter, new hope. And in a small brick house across the street, Margaret Cole still lives, still waters her herbs, still hums old hymns no one remembers but her. One morning, there's a knock at the door. She opens it, and there stands a teenage boy holding a bouquet of wildflowers. "Mrs. Cole?" "Yes, dear. I'm Oliver, Tyler's son." Her hand trembles slightly, but her voice doesn't. "I know who you are." He looks down, embarrassed. "Dad told me everything. He said I should come if I ever wanted to understand what courage looks like." She smiles softly. "Then you came to the right place." He hands her the flowers. Simple, messy, honest. She takes them and places them in a jar on the table. "Would you like some tea?" He nods. "Please." They sit by the window as the harbor breeze drifts through the curtains. The boy looks out at the park, at the sign that bears her name, and says, "It's true, isn't it? Truth doesn't age." She smiles. "No, child, it just waits for someone brave enough to listen." The camera pulls back slowly, through the open window, across the bright garden, up to the maple shimmering in the light. The sound of a distant gavel echoes one last time, soft, steady, eternal.